Yeah, I got a private message saying, "Are you recording?" Now I've begun recording, so welcome. Anyone who's watching it later, welcome. This tends to be a habit of mine. I had automatic recording at the beginning, but then I'm just letting people in, and then I just forget to hit record again. Anyway, Joe asked to be a co-host so that he can let people in for me. Thank you, Joe. I made you a co-host. And if, huh? Yeah, my wife's here. Everyone say hi. Okay. We've got some prayer requests here. Okay. Let me open us up in prayer. First, let me just say congratulations to Nate and Erica, who lead one of our micro churches. They just had a baby this week. We had a few other babies this past week too. So congratulations, welcome to all the new babies that are here. We're very excited. Got Tamara. Pray for all the teachers. Yep, teachers and students. School this week. Judy, Charlie's dad. We got some cancer requests privately. Kelsey waiting for test results. Children returning to school. Baby Lila and baby Jaylee. So we've got a couple more babies that were born this past week. Awesome. Okay, we have Sue's son Tito is out there and struggling with drug addiction. Super scary situation there. Patience for people that we don't agree with. A missing teen. Yeah, so let me open us up in prayer. God, we first off just want to say that we're so thankful for all the new babies, the new additions to families and to our larger community. So we thank you for the gift of life. We thank you that you've created each of these people in your image. You made them and designed them in really beautiful, unique ways. And we look forward to getting to know them over the years ahead. But I also pray, I think about what Sue said, and so many of us have kids. Sometimes there's heartache involved too when you have someone that you love and they're making a mess of their lives. So I just pray for redemption and healing and restoration. Tito would come back, and those who are struggling with health concerns, test results, cancer. I just ask for healing and restoration in so many people's bodies right now. I pray for school coming up. Lots of kids going back, some not going back, doing homeschool. Some of the schools are open full time, some are open 2 days a week, and it's tough for parents trying to figure out whether they're going to send their kids or keep them home, and teachers going back to school. And we just pray for your blessing over all of our children, over all the students, those that are in school, teachers, that you would just work in this season in a really beautiful, unique, and powerful way. Somehow redeem it and make it a good thing, a good experience. Help us to be, patient and understanding. There are lots of people that we don't agree with, but you've called us to love our enemies and pray for those that persecute us. And help us not to be arrogant and act like know-it-alls and defensive, but instead help us to seek to understand people that we disagree with and bless people that we disagree with, and that we represent you well as a community. We thank you for this morning. I thought it was going to rain, but it's beautiful. It's fantastic. So thank you for that. We'll talk to you later. Amen. Yeah, I would like to start by doing some reading. And I would like you to, if you can pull up an app or pull out your Bible if you have it on you, pull up your Bible app, Genesis 37. And I'm going to read from the Message because it's a big chunk and it reads pretty well from the Message. It's kind of a super understandable story form. But I'm going to read from Genesis 37. And while I read this, I just want you to ask yourself the question of who you relate to in this story. Do you relate to Joseph, or do you relate to his brothers, the father? Who do you relate to in the story? So Genesis 37, starting in verse 2. This is the story of Jacob. The story continues with Joseph, 17 years old at the time. He's helping out his brothers and herding the flocks. These were his half-brothers, actually, the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. If you know any Bilhahs and Zilpahs, we're not picking on them. It's just the names. And Joseph brought his father bad reports on them. Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he was the child of his old age. He was the favorite. He made him an elaborately embroidered coat. When his brothers realized that their father loved him more than them, they grew to hate him. They wouldn't even speak to him. Joseph had a dream. When he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said, "Listen to this dream that I had. We were all out in a field gathering bundles of wheat. All of a sudden, my bundle stood straight up and your bundle circled around it and bowed down to mine." His brother said, "So, you're going to rule us? You're going to boss us around?" And they hated him more than ever because of his dreams and because of the way that he talked. He had another dream and told this one also to his brothers. "I dreamed another dream. The sun and the moon and 11 stars bowed down to me." When he told it to his father and brothers, his father reprimanded him. "What's with all this dreaming? Am I and your mother and your brothers all supposed to bow down to you?" Now his brothers were really jealous, but his father brooded over the whole business. His brothers had gone off to Shechem, where they were pasturing their father's flocks. Israel said to Joseph, "Your brothers are with flocks in Shechem. Come, I want to send you to them." Joseph said, "I'm ready." He said, "Go and see how your brothers and the flocks are doing and bring me back a report." He sent him off from the valley of Hebron to Shechem. A man met him as he was wandering through the fields and asked him, "What are you looking for?" He said, "I'm trying to find my brothers. Do you have any idea where they are grazing their flocks?" The man said, "They've left here, but I overheard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph took off, tracked his brothers down, and found them in Dothan. They spotted him off in the distance. By the time he got to them, they had cooked up a plot to kill him. The brothers were saying, "Here comes that dreamer. Let's kill him and throw him into one of these old cisterns. We can say that a vicious animal ate him up. We'll see what his dreams amount to." Reuben heard the brothers talking and intervened to save him. "We're not going to kill him. No murder. Go ahead and throw him in this cistern out here in the wild, but don't hurt him." Reuben planned to go back later and get him out and take him back to his father. When Joseph reached his brothers, they ripped off the fancy coat he was wearing. They grabbed him and threw him into a cistern. The cistern was dry. There wasn't any water in it. Then they sat down to eat their supper. Looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites on their way from Gilead, their camels loaded with spices, ointments, and perfumes to sell in Egypt. Judah said, "Brothers, what are we going to do? Or what are we going to get out of killing your brother and concealing the evidence? Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites, but let's not kill him. He is, after all, our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. By that time, the Midianite traders were passing by. His brothers pulled Joseph out of the cistern and sold him for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took Joseph with them down to Egypt. Later, Reuben came back and went to the cistern, no Joseph. He ripped his clothes in despair. Beside himself, he went to his brothers. "The boy's gone. What am I going to do?" They took Joseph's coat, butchered a goat, dipped the coat in blood. They took the fancy coat back to their father and said, "We found this. Look it over. Do you think this is your son's coat?" He recognized it at once. "My son's coat. A wild animal has eaten him." Joseph torn, limb from limb. Jacob tore his clothes in grief, dressed in rough burlap, and mourned his son a long, long time. His sons and daughters tried to comfort him, but he refused their comfort. "I'll go to the grave, mourning for my son." Oh, how his father wept for him. In Egypt, the Midianites sold Joseph to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, manager of his household affairs. All right, so who do you relate to in this story? Talk about it with your micro church gathering. Put it in a chat. Who do you relate to in this story? You relate to Joseph, relate to the brothers, relate to the father. Who do you find yourself relating to in this story? First part of the story. Okay, put it in the chat. Who do you relate to? We've heard Joseph here. What about everyone else? Behind me, the kids inside the house have commandeered a karaoke machine, and they've turned the inside of the house into a haunted house. So I can hear screams of terror behind me while we're all talking. This is the beauty of incarnational living, right? Okay, Reuben, he knew it was wrong, but went along and let the crowd have its way. Okay. Each one at some point in my life. Interesting. You can kind of relate to all the characters in some way. Okay. You can relate to the brothers feeling angry that Joseph was making them feel inferior. But I wouldn't plot to kill anyone. That's good. That's good. It's a very dark story for sure. Yeah. Okay. Judy says the father. Okay. The father. Okay, so as you think about the different characters that you may or may not relate to, we're going to fast forward to Genesis 45. We're going forward quite a few chapters. A lot's happened in between. And before I read from Genesis 45, I'll just fill you in on a little bit of a backdrop on what takes place next. Sold into slavery, and he actually is so good at his job and ends up being promoted and becomes the right-hand man to the leader of Egypt. He's the right-hand man. and he's in charge of everything. And everything that he's in charge of prospers and goes incredibly well. So here he is. He's separated from his father, who he was the favorite. He had an incredible bond with his dad. Separated, sold into slavery. His life couldn't be any worse at the time. But then he rises up to this incredible leadership and power, and he's very wise, and God just seems to really bless him, even though he had been blessed before and seemed to have God's favor under his father. Now he's out working with the ruler of Egypt, and God gives him favor again, and he ends up overseeing everything, and everything goes incredibly well for him. But Pharaoh's wife finds him attractive, wants to sleep with him, and he refuses it. And he ends up being accused by Pharaoh's wife of trying to sleep with her. And so he gets thrown in prison. And it's not fair or right. He's wrongfully accused, thrown in prison. And so now he's down at the bottom again. He's once again up, down. He's at the top, he's at the bottom. He's at the top again. He's at the bottom. He's in prison. But in prison, he ends up becoming a leader in the prison. And so he's overseeing everyone else that's in prison with him. And God gives him favor again. He tells a couple dreams he interprets a couple dreams. His interpretations are right. But then one of the guys that he interprets dreams for, he tells him, when you get out, remember me. And the guy totally forgets him. And he's stuck in jail for 2 more years. Totally forgotten. And so there he is in the pit again, in jail, waiting. And finally, Pharaoh starts to have these crazy dreams. And he can't interpret them. He doesn't know what they're about. And he brings in some magicians and chief people and says, hey, can you guys explain what the heck? Like, I don't know if I'm eating some bad panini or something, but I'm having some crazy dreams, have no idea what this means. And nobody could figure it out. But then the guy who was in prison with Joseph said, oh, I remember being in prison with a guy who interpreted a dream for me, and he was right. And here I am. And so they get Joseph out. He interprets the dream for Pharaoh, and his interpretation makes total sense, right? So he ends up once again restored to leadership and second in command, and basically running the entire nation all over again. So he goes from the top to the bottom, to the top, to the bottom, to the top again. It's a really crazy kind of journey that he goes on. And so this is where we sort of pick up, is he's, once again, he is in charge of everything. He knows that there's this severe famine that's coming. And so he has the nation of, the whole nation of Egypt save all kinds of supplies, food, store it up for 7 years worth, because they're going to have, several years of plenty, really great crops, and then they're going to have a bunch of years of famine. And so they save up, they store all this stuff up so that one day they could be a blessing to the nation and to others and survive the drought. So here we go, Genesis 45. That's the summary of all the things that happen in multiple chapters. Now we're going to skip forward, because this story, mainly what I'm trying to paint the picture of is the ups and downs of his journey, but also this journey with his brothers and what he went through with his brothers. So a lot of bad history when your brothers sell you off to a group of people in slavery. You're gone, you're exiled, you're away, you leave your family seemingly forever. And God continues to use him. And that wasn't the end of his story. He didn't allow it to be the end of his story. But here we go. Verse 4. This is right after Joseph sees his brothers who come to Egypt, and they come to Egypt because they hear that there's food in the land. They don't know that their brother who they sold off was alive. They have no idea that they're about to meet their brother again, who they sold off into slavery. So Joseph, verse 3, spoke to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father really still alive? But his brothers couldn't say a word. They were speechless. They couldn't believe what they were hearing and seeing. Come closer to me, Joseph said to his brothers. They came closer. I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. But don't feel badly. Don't blame yourselves for selling me. God was behind it. God sent me here ahead of you to save lives. There has been a famine in the land now for 2 years. The famine will continue for 5 more years, neither plowing nor harvesting. God sent me on ahead to pave the way and make sure there was a remnant in the land to save your lives in an amazing act of deliverance. So you see, it wasn't you who sent me here, but God. He set me in place as a father to Pharaoh, put me in charge of his personal affairs, and made me ruler of all Egypt. Hurry back to my father. Tell him, your son Joseph says, I'm master of all of Egypt. Come as fast as you can and join me here. I'll give you a place to live in Goshen, where you'll be close to me. You, your children, your grandchildren, your flocks, your herds, and anything else you can think of. I'll take care of you there completely. There are still 5 more years of famine ahead. I'll make sure all your needs are taken care of, you and everyone connected with you. You won't want for a thing. Look at me. You can see for yourselves, and my brother Benjamin can see for himself that it's me, my own mouth, telling you all of this. Tell my father all about the high position I hold in Egypt. Tell him everything you've seen here, but don't take all day. Hurry up and get my father down here. Then Joseph threw himself on his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. He then kissed all his brothers and wept over them. Only then were his brothers able to talk with him. The story was reported in Pharaoh's palace. Joseph's brothers have come. It was good news to Pharaoh and all who worked with him. This incredible story of everybody reuniting and like a happily ever after sort of deal at the end of this incredibly wild, bizarre, weird story. But I have to start again with this point that I've been making with all the stories that I'm reading here in the Old Testament over the past couple of months, with the point that Joseph is an incredibly unlikable character again. And all the characters that we seem to read about are incredibly unlikable people. And we tend to read or hear about people like Joseph, and we think about them as being good people or saints or people that God used throughout the Bible, but it's as if God continually goes out of his way to highlight the badness of the good characters. It's as if God is making a special point that he uses the unqualified, the least of these, the most unlikely characters, as the people that are his spokespeople, his people of redemption, his leaders. And so you end up with Joseph, who at the start of the story, when you read about him, I related to the brothers. I related to the brothers feeling like I have had many points where I look at people and go, I don't like that person because they're arrogant. They think they're better, or they look down on other people, or they seem to be the teacher's pet, so to speak. And, they're loved more than me, and I feel like I'm less than them, or something like that. And so you have this incredibly unlikable character in the way that you look at him, and he's kind of cocky, right? He's sort of a cocky guy. He's the most loved by his father, but none of his brothers like him. I mean, what does that say? When you got 12 brothers, none of them like you. None of them like him. All these brothers don't like him. And he's walking around saying, let me tell you about this dream where you all bow down to me, including mom and dad. Everybody bows down to me, right? You read this character and you go, he sounds pretty arrogant. He kind of sounds like a jerk. He kind of sounds like an entitled jerk. And dad gives him this royal robe and blesses him, and he's clearly a favorite. And you go, I don't like that dad likes you more than us and blesses you more than us and gets special favors. Like you get special favors instead of us, and you get special trips, and he takes you to sporting events and not us, and we get in trouble and you don't, and he overlooks things with you but not us, and you're the favored one and we're not the favored ones. And so you sort of feel, if you read this story in a fresh way, like you've never read it before, you sort of feel for Joseph's brothers. You go, I feel bad for these guys. Like they're sort of afterthoughts. They're not as important. They're sort of feel like they're cast out. So you've got this other preposterous character that none of us really care to relate to. He's the favorite one. He's the entitled one. If you've ever felt like you're not enough, if you've ever felt like you couldn't do anything to impress your father or your mother, if you've ever felt undervalued or overlooked or not noticed, that's all of Joseph's brothers in this story. Okay. So you end up with this character that you go, you don't want to see him succeed. In fact, in all the movies, and because we've got a 12-year-old girl at home, in all the teen movies, the really cocky, like most popular kid in school always has the huge downfall. And then like all the overlooked loser kids rise up and win at the end of the story. Well, this is sort of the opposite of that. You've got the cocky, arrogant, entitled kid that wins. And you go, it's not supposed to turn out that way. It's not supposed to turn out that way. The brothers are supposed to win. But the brother in their bitterness takes over. And then they sell off their brother and do these, take desperate actions. It's pretty bad. The second observation in this is exile. That Joseph went through these periods of life where he felt like he was alone, like he was gone, exiled. You ever feel like you're living in between where you were and where you want to be? I came from this, I'm trying to get over there, but I'm sort of in between where I came from and where I want to get. I'm sort of in this land of exile. I'm in the in-between of where I came from and where I want to go. And so he's constantly in this exile kind of experience. He's cast out from his family. He's a slave. He's alone. He feels like nobody can relate to him sort of experience. Yet God still has favor on him. Everything he does, everything he touches turns to gold, so to speak. The nation is effective and successful and rises up and prosperous and all of that. Then, once again, exile. He's falsely accused. He's in prison. And now he's alone again. But again, everything he touches turns to gold, and God rises him back up and uses him again. And so if you've ever felt like you can't get that job thing to work out, or you got passed up on that promotion, or you can't seem to get ahead financially, or you feel like a reject or a castaway, or you feel misunderstood or excluded, or you feel like people don't understand who you are or your heart, or you've been mislabeled, exile is about being out. It's about being displaced. It's about feeling alone. It's about, my God, why have you forsaken me? And so this story, along with every story that we read, finds its fulfillment in the person of Jesus. It does. Jesus, the Son of God, who had everything, who had the riches of the heavens, who had the royal robe, left the riches and the treasures of heaven, came to earth, was stripped of all of that, all of the benefits of heaven. He's living in a broken world. He's born in a manger. He lives a pretty hidden life out amongst the people. And then he's rejected. He's mistreated. He's tortured. He's spit on. He's betrayed. Who is Jesus if not, once again, the Joseph character, except a better Joseph? He's the Joseph character, except not a cocky one, a humble one. He's the Joseph character, and he's rejected so that he can save humanity. The same way Joseph hits the bottom, but then he ends up saving his brothers and his parents. He saves everybody. This is an image, another picture of Jesus, who comes to save us, and he saves us out of his exile. He saves us out of his being separated from the Father so that we would never have to be separated from the Father. Joseph is separated from the Father, but then saves the family. Jesus is separated from the Father, but then saves humanity. All of these pictures, all of these images ultimately make sense, and they find their fulfillment in Jesus. So this exile image finds its fulfillment in Jesus. And so you end up with redemption. You end up with salvation. You end up with a happy ending. But how do you forgive? How do you forgive people that have wronged you and screwed you over? I am, for one, thankful that we live in a world where people are so forgiving, That's just a little bit of sarcasm. Think about the struggle and the journey that people have of somebody's hurt me, mistreated me, let me down, betrayed me, lied to me, and so I'm done with you. I cut you off forever. But yet you see in the story of Joseph, he was betrayed by his brothers. He was separated from his family. If you had 20 years to think about that, or however long it was, if you had years upon years or decades to just sort of stew on the fact that the people that you were closest to betrayed you and ruined your life, like really truly ruined the life that you used to have, how would you respond to them when you see them again? Would you embrace them? Would you say, you know what, you meant it for evil, but God used it for good? And even though you went off and sold me out and got rid of me, pretended like I was dead, told my father that I was dead, took my robe, killed an animal, put blood all over it. You went to great lengths to cover up the fact that you sold me off into slavery. And yet when he's reunited with his brothers, you see forgiveness. You see grace. How do you do that? How does somebody do that? And ultimately, this is what Jesus does when he's on the cross, right? When he's on the cross, what does he say to the people that are crucifying him? What does he say to God as he looks at his tormentors? My God, why have you forsaken me? Of course, he yells out. But he looks out at the people and he says, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Father, forgive them. And you can see in the Joseph stories, looking at his brothers with the spirit of forgiveness. He embraces them. This cocky kid. I mean, sometimes we forget how much God changes people over a period of time too. You got this entitled brother walking around. Nobody likes his arrogance and his dreams and, his importance. And he tells on his brothers because they're bad, right? Tattletale kind of thing. Nobody likes that image of Joseph, but yet when you see him next, he's forgiving. You see God's hand on his life and restoring him. Do you ever feel like people that have wronged you 10, 15 years ago, or even 2, 3 years ago, or even 6 months ago, that they are the same person as the last time that you saw them? We tend to think that people are who they were the last time we saw them. But let me ask you this. Are you the same person that you were 5 years ago? 10 years ago? Even 6 months ago? Because God changes us. There's a promise that the God who began a good work in you will bring it to completion. To love other people, we have to assume good motive. Love believes the best about other people. We believe that the God who began a good work in us will change us. And when we look around at other people, we shouldn't just assume that they are who we were the last time we saw them. Here's Joseph. He was a different cat when his brothers saw him. A totally different animal when his brothers saw him. Full of forgiveness. How do you forgive brothers who sold you into slavery, separated you from the father and mother that you loved? What is forgiveness? Forgiveness is losing. Forgiveness is losing. It's choosing to not win. And I'm a competitive guy. I like to win. I don't want to lose. I like to win. And yet forgiveness is about losing. I don't have to prove I'm right. I don't have to defeat you and be over you. I'm actually going to die to winning so that I can win you and have a relationship with you again. It's better to win your friend or win your spouse than to win an argument. And here you have Joseph dying to himself, forgiving his brothers. Instead of revenge, it's forgiveness. And you have in Jesus, rather than condemning the world, saving the world. Instead of crushing his enemies, forgiving his enemies, calling out for their forgiveness. I didn't come to the world to condemn the world, but to save the world. I came not for the righteous, but for sinners. What do you have to do in order to be saved? Just be dead. Just be lost. If you're lost, you're found. If you're dead, Jesus raises the dead. What keeps us from being saved? Holding on to our life, having to win, having to be on top, not seeing that we need saving, not acknowledging that we're lost, not seeing that we're broken. God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. It's why the guy beats his chest in the temple and says, "Be merciful to me, a sinner." God says, "Righteous." Because the only thing we need in order to be found is to be lost. And the biggest struggle, the biggest obstacle that I find in people to faith is not goodness or badness. It's inability to admit that they're lost, that they're broken, that they're imperfect. It's a holding on to our goodness and trying to defend ourselves, saying, "I'm not all that bad. I'm right. I'm okay." What is forgiveness? It's losing. It's death. It's the cross. It's choosing to absorb the pain out of love for another. The other key to forgiveness is self-awareness. When you know how messed up you are, when you know that you're broken and imperfect, how do you hold on to the sins of another person when you know that you're a sinner too? How do you hold on to unforgiveness when you know that you're also imperfect and broken and flawed? But the last thing that I'd like to sort of highlight here is just the ups and downs of the journey. And that is Joseph, he went from high to low to high to low to high again. And life is kind of like that. And the spiritual journey is like that. And so many people think that when they come to faith, everything's going to be great. Do you ever see that with someone that God uses in the Bible, that they come to faith and everything's perfect for them? I don't see it. In fact, I see all who desire to live godly in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. There will be trials. If they persecuted me, they'll persecute you. And The enemy prowls about like a roaring lion, and we live a life of adversity and ups and downs. And if we have a high priest who went through rejection and separation and betrayal and pain and loss, and he wept, why do we think if we follow Jesus that we wouldn't experience what Jesus experienced? Did Jesus get to avoid pain or suffering or rejection or betrayal or loss? No, he went through all of that. And so those of us who follow Jesus are going to go through the same sorts of things. We're going to go through the highs and the lows and the ups and the downs. I used to think when Jackie and I first got married that, and we would get into an argument, like, oh my goodness, like maybe this whole thing is going to implode and she's going to hate me and it's not going to work and we're not going to be together. But then over time, you learn to say, oh, we'll get through it. We'll work through it, because you become familiar with the fact that there are ups and downs and highs and lows and super great days and then rough days and challenges that you overcome. And the challenge actually can make you stronger and healthier. You know, James says that the testing of our faith produces endurance. We become stronger as we overcome obstacles and difficulties and trials. And it's the same thing with our faith. I think a stronger faith is a faith that's tested. It's when you have doubts, but overcome doubts. It's when you get mistreated. It's when you're let down by other people. It's the times that you feel like you don't hear God, but then you overcome those obstacles as well. A real faith goes through the ups and the downs and the highs and the lows and the loss and the promotions and the job loss and the sickness and the health and all of those types of things. It's all a part of the journey. That God promises to never leave us or forsake us. He doesn't promise it's always going to be easy or smooth, but he promises that he'll be there. And if we have Jesus, if God is for us, who can be against us? And what can separate us from the love of God? You know, sickness, trials, disappointment, discouragement, beating, imprisonment. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. If we have that, we have everything. Mama said there'd be days like this. And so you will go through, feelings of being unliked. You will go through seeing people prosper that you don't want to see prosper and feel like you fail and feel like you're not noticed. You will go through times of exile where you feel alone. Even if you're surrounded by people, you feel alone. There will be times where people betray you and you can either absorb it and die to yourself and forgive, or hold on to it and be bitter and want to sell them off to some band of traders that comes by and dip their coat in goat blood. I don't know, maybe you wouldn't go that far. You'll go through ups and downs. The good news is, faith the grain of a mustard seed. We're not called to have perfect faith all the time. It says, faith the grain of a mustard seed. I'd use even the most broken, doubt-filled people. I mean, the disciples doubted like crazy. Jesus came back from the dead. They doubted. I won't believe unless I see the nail scars in his hands and his feet, and I can touch his side. Like, these are people that walk with Jesus and saw miracles, but they doubted. God chose to use liars and arrogant people and deceivers and murderers and polygamists. Chose to use all those types of people. And even the disciples who were doubters, even Paul, who wrote most of the New Testament, who murdered Christians, persecuted the church. God chooses to use unlikely characters like you and me, which is good news. It's good news for us. So if you believe it, embrace it. Embrace it and just enjoy the God who loves you and loves me and allow him to inspire the way you live with the people around you. Well, that's all I got to say about that. I'm going to pray, and then I'll say hello to some of you. You can unmute yourselves. Let me pray. And if you didn't see the guide, I sent it in an email where you can process some of the main points and questions that I put out there for us. Say hi again to our group here. Yay. It's good to be here. We have to finish all the bacon when I get off. God, we just thank you for your grace, that all we need to do in order to be saved is to be lost or dead or broken and imperfect, blind. And so you've just called us to admit our inability to just stop pretending like we're impressive, like we have it all together. The gospel frees us from the need to pretend that we're impressive. And so we just thank you for your grace. We thank you that you love us. We thank you that you choose messed up and flawed people like us. And I pray for those who want to hold on to their life and not see themselves as flawed and broken, that we would all be humbled, that you would help us to understand our own brokenness and inability, that you would strip us of our pride so that we would find life in you. Help us to be the most humble people. Help us to quit defending ourselves. Help us to quit fighting, and help us to love. Help us to love our enemies and pray for those that persecute us. Help us to forgive people that have disappointed us. I pray for a stronger, more courageous movement of churches through NRC. Love you. We thank you for your goodness. Help us to enjoy this beautiful day. Amen. Great to see you all. You may unmute yourselves and say hi if you so desire.
Hi, Mike.
What's up?